This is Smiles TV. Welcome to Smiles Television Talk Show. I'm your host, Stephanie Anthony Miles, and thank you for tuning in again. We have a delightful show for you. We're going to help dispel some of those mental health issues with What's on Your Mind with Dr. Des. That's Dr. Desarie Holmes, our expert psychologist. Also in the second half of the broadcast, we have Mr. James Ingram, who's a columnist from the award-winning St. Louis American newspaper. He's going to be bridging the gap on the east side. If you remember, we had James Clark. Those two are going to join up together later on down the road, and they'll be bridging the east side and the west side divide. Remember, Jesus Christ was born of a virgin. He was crucified and buried, and he rose on the third day. Confess with your mouth that he is Lord. Believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, and thou shalt be saved. Stay tuned for more Smiles. The Jackie Joyner Kersee Foundation invites you to the first annual open house and trivia night at 6 o'clock p.m. Saturday, August 26th at the JJK Center, 101 Jackie Joyner Kersee Circle in East St. Louis, Illinois. The JJK Foundation's open house and trivia night will give you an opportunity to view the magnificent JJK Center, participate in trivia night, win cash prizes, and participate in a silent auction. Teams of 8, you only need to pay $200 to participate. On Saturday, August 26th at 6 o'clock p.m., come to the open house and trivia night at the JJK Center. Sponsorship opportunities available. Contact Barb at 314-922-3071. Please contact Barb for additional information at 314-922-3071. Welcome back to Smiles Television Talk Show. I'm sitting here with Dr. Desarie Holmes, our expert psychologist. Dr. Holmes, thank you. You know what? Every time I say you're our expert, you start laughing. It's not funny. You really, really are, and we appreciate you. Thank you again for another episode of What's on Your Mind with Dr. Des. Break down, what is a mental health stigma?
The stigma about mental health really is anytime a person has a mental illness or a mental health disorder, either they acknowledge it, they disclose it, or someone even suspects someone of having a mental illness. Typically what that does is the person can be discriminated against, they can be singled out because they have it, they can be devalued because they have it. And this is all coming from society. And because society views people with mental illness very negatively, or they can view people with a mental illness very negatively, it's the attitude that people have, which typically can be very negative. And then the behaviors can be the prejudice and the discrimination, or singling a person out can be the behaviors that's associated with it.
What are some of the ways that we can eliminate those stigmas? How can we, as family members, providers, help those stigmas be eliminated?
One of the things that I think is very important with really helping the community, society at large, as well as down to the individual level, is to, one, when you think someone has a mental illness or someone has been diagnosed, again, allow them to be very comfortable with talking about it. You become very comfortable with talking about it. Educate yourself. There's a great organization out there called NAMI. It's the National Association of Mental Illness, National Alliance of Mental Illness. And they do a wonderful job with providing literature. They provide peer groups, they provide support groups. So educating yourself, talking to, a great way to begin is a primary care physician. The primary care physician usually is the first line of defense. That's typically where people will go and have that conversation. Asking your primary care physician about information, where you can go to get the information, Of course, we're now in the Google age, so everything you can look up online, you can go on the internet. But even with that, sometimes people may not know what they're looking for. So starting with your primary care physician or your nurse practitioner is a great place to start.
Have you found or have you seen that finances play a big role in people not wanting to get help? And if so, are there dollars available any place that people can tap into for additional help?
So I consider that to be a barrier. So barriers. And so barriers to getting help, stigma can definitely be a barrier. Again, because oftentimes people might want to deny that there's a mental illness, or because, again, the stigma that's associated with it, so they may not seek the proper help. But then additional barriers to getting mental health services. I think one of the biggest places is insurance, healthcare coverage.
Okay.
We're in a climate now to where we are dead smack in with what is going to be available to people in the near future regarding their health coverage. And mental health coverage always is at the forefront in terms of, are people going to be able to have it, or are they not going to have it? And a barrier with that is, even if you have it, you might have limited coverage.
That's what I was going to ask you. Even with insurance, do most insurance providers cover mental health issues?
It really depends. And so even if they offer mental health coverage, there may be limitations. There may be co-pays. Co-pays can be very expensive. When you're talking about communities that are really already lacking in resources or already struggling, so having to pay a $25 or $40 copay for an office visit can be very detrimental. And so when you're having to choose between paying for medication or eating, that's a hard choice. That's a hard choice. So you may have mental health coverage in your insurance, but your coverage might be very limited. So I would strongly recommend individuals to pay very close attention to what exactly your insurance is covering. So that's one barrier. Another barrier, believe it or not, transportation. If people cannot afford to get to their appointments, they're not going to keep the appointments.
Wow, I understand.
So people don't often consider transportation as being a barrier. Another barrier, childcare. If you have young, small children and you have to access public transportation, so trying to take your child with you to your doctor's appointment, particularly where, say, for instance, you may be seeing a therapist, and so you're in therapy and you're trying to speak with your therapist, and yet you may be distracted by your small child because you don't have childcare available.
We need to take a quick break, and if there are any other barriers that you want to discuss, we'll do that when we come back, and even talk about how we can help eliminate some of those barriers. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Stay tuned for more Smiles. We're talking with Dr. Desarie Holmes, our expert psychologist on mental health issues. And don't forget, coming up, don't go away after this segment, because we have Mr. James Ingram, who's a columnist with the award-winning St. Louis American newspaper. Dr. Holmes, barriers to people getting the help they need. You talked about child care. You talked about insurance leading way to being a barrier even. What are some of the other barriers that you may have discovered?
Another huge barrier, shortage of mental health care providers, psychiatrists. Having a psychiatrist in the area and having access to that psychiatrist. Another barrier can be when you get an appointment. It could be a lengthy period of time before you get in for an initial appointment to see a psychiatrist. And then geographically where you live, you may not have access. You may be, particularly in some of the more rural areas, in our surrounding areas, they really struggle with trying to recruit mental health care providers, particularly psychiatrists. So there is a national shortage on psychiatrists in the area, and psychiatrists are really at a premium getting an appointment. So oftentimes people may see a nurse practitioner particularly for their medications, because the psychiatrist really provides for the medications. You definitely have your clinicians, your therapists, your counselors to provide psychotherapy, your talk therapy, and again, getting appointment, it can be a challenge.
I have a question. So I've heard people who may have some issues who just say, well, I don't really want to go to a stranger to discuss my mental health issues.
Right.
How can we impress upon people that you guys are trained in that area? This is what you do.
Right.
I mean, I'm talking about from teens to the elderly.
Right. So exactly. And it can be intimidating because it is a one-way communication, if you will. So people sometimes feel like they're doing all the talking. They feel like sometimes they don't know that much about the therapist, because we are trained to not disclose a lot of information, because it's not about us. It's about the person that we're providing care and treatment to. So when people say that, and here's the biggest thing, again, and I mentioned this on the last show, what goes on in this house stays in our house. I'm not going to tell people about my business. And that is where people really begin to suffer in silence, and it's killing them softly. What I typically do is encourage individuals to say, you know what, again, the first time that you've ever gone to your doctor, that doctor was a stranger. You did not know that doctor. But if you feel the need to feel like you want to have some level of connection, then ask around, ask people, do you know of anyone? And again, start with your primary care physician, because oftentimes they have colleagues that they feel very comfortable with. I know I get a lot of phone calls. People will ask me, Dr. Holmes, do you have anyone that you can recommend? Sometimes people have a preference. They want maybe a female and not a male. For some people, they would rather have a male than a female.
And that's a good point as well, because if you are looking for any kind of help, how can you identify that doctor that best suits your needs? What process would you suggest people go through? You just said contact your doctor and ask around, but what if they have a need, they already don't want to share it with anybody?
Right.
So how can they match themselves with someone who really is targeted in that particular area of concern?
That's a wonderful question. That's a great question, because it is about a goodness of fit. You definitely want to feel comfortable. You definitely want to feel like you're being supported. And anytime that you are with a therapist and you feel like you're not able to establish that rapport, you're not making that connection, you feel like that you're not really working on the issues that you need to work on, one of the things that when you're coming into therapy, the therapist will always ask you up front, so what is it that you really want to zero in on? What would you like to work on? And then the treatment plan builds from there, and that gets incorporated into your treatment plan. And if you feel like that therapist is not a good fit or a good match, by all means, find yourself another therapist until you do feel like it's a good fit.
Dr. Des again, what's on your mind with Dr. Desarie Holmes? And don't go away. We have coming up next Mr. James Ingram, who's a columnist with the award-winning St. Louis American newspaper. The Jackie Joyner Kersee Foundation invites you to the first annual open house and trivia night at 6:00 p.m. Saturday, August 26th at the JJK Center, 101 Jackie Joyner Kersee Circle in East St. Louis, Illinois. The JJK Foundation's Open House and Trivia Night will give you an opportunity to view the magnificent JJK Center, participate in Trivia Night, win cash prizes, and participate in a silent auction. Teams of 8, you only need to pay $200 to participate. On Saturday, August 26th at 6:00 p.m., come to the Open House and Trivia Night at the JJK Center. Sponsorship opportunities available. Contact Barb at 314-922-3071. Please contact Barb for additional information at 314-922-3071. Welcome back to Smiles Television Talk Show. I'm sitting here with James Ingram. You know, we're bridging many gaps. We talked to Dr. Desarie Holmes a few minutes ago, and James Ingram is here now, and he's a columnist for the award-winning St. Louis American newspaper. James Ingram is an East St. Louis native who graduated from Boston University. He also has a certificate in leadership from Harvard. James Ingram has a certificate also in prison development, and he's going to help me with that a little bit and explain that to you. It was a program called Making It Work. Another great thing James Ingram has done, and we could go on and on, this is just a little bit of information about him, but he was press secretary for former Mayor Carl E. Officer in East St. Louis, Illinois, and I'm really grateful to have James with us. James, thank you for coming to Smiles Television Talk Show.
My pleasure.
And you know what, we are bridging the gap. And I just want to thank you again. As I said earlier, we talked to James Clark, who was with Better Family Life, vice president over there, and he's going to be coming on periodically. And I really want to see the two of you together, talking about things on the east side and the west side of the Missouri side, and how we can actually come together because we're so close. And the only thing that divides us is the Mississippi River. Just so our audience can get a better feel, because you're doing a lot of things and most people know you, but there might be a few who don't. So tell us a little bit about yourself, even from childhood to where you are today, and I'll cut you off when it's time.
Okay, well, I'm a native of East St. Louis. If you want to just, that's a school question. I went to Slade Elementary, went to Clark Junior High, now middle school. And I graduated from Eastside. Went on, as you said earlier in the intro, went to Boston University. Got a certificate, professional development from the Grad School of Education from Harvard in Change Leadership. It was Bill and Melinda Gates Institute. I'm certified as a prison reentry employment specialist.
Let's stop right there real quickly, because that's the part. All of it interests me, but what made you?
It's something I've been doing. I'm certified to teach a certified curriculum called Making It Work. So I've been doing that in St. Louis County Justice Center for almost 8 years. So I went on to get a prison reentry employment specialist certification from Bureau of Prisons. Actually, in fact, last year, to kind of help with the employment end of it, because people go to prison, they're going to get out, they need to work. So to have a specialization in that, to kind of assist them with that end. So that's something that I pursued, something I'm pretty passionate about that I've been doing. So, and pretty soon I'm going to be doing it in East St. Louis at a church near you. So I'm going to let them roll that out. But because
so
we need it over
bridging the gaps. You're bridging many gaps, just right there. So go on. So you have that certificate, and you're on the radio.
I've been doing radio stuff. I did, in fact, last week there's a new station, 99.5, over in St. Louis. I did their Saturday morning roundtable on last week with Keith Antone and that group. So I've done that, and I've been writing for the St. Louis American probably 14 years now. Previously, I'd written for the East St. Louis Monitor.
You know what, James?
I've been busy.
You have been busy, and that's why I'm just so grateful that you took time to come out and chat with us. But your articles, and not just your article, I could talk to you personally, and you'll say the same things. You are not afraid, are you?
There's no reason to be afraid. I'm afraid of God. That's about it.
Fear of God.
And most of these politicians don't look like God to me.
Right.
So to that extent, they literally write the articles for me. If they wouldn't do some of the things that they do, I could just write positive articles about East St. Louis. But they apparently don't want me to do that.
Okay, so let's go back to when you were with Officer, and I had the pleasure of working with him as well, and he was a unique character. He's actually one of
that's a good word.
He's a unique character, and he's actually my favorite mayor.
Mine as well.
You're okay, Carl. We just put a plug out there for you. You are our favorite mayor, so you better be watching this broadcast. But so, what challenges did you face then? And twofold question: what challenges did you face then, and how did that position help you to grow into where you are today?
I owe a lot of what I know in terms of politics, in terms of how media works, to Mayor Officer. And I say from the standpoint of I was very young, came in, and he brought me in for the simple fact that I always was very vocal in terms of written and speaking. out about the political climate. That, and I believe his words to me were, I can get people in here that got journalism backgrounds, but I want somebody that knows about politics and how these people, interact with citizens and how they, the process works. So in terms of the media, Carl attracted a lot of media, good and bad, during the time that I was there, and I was literally thrown into the deep end of the pool. Carl was very young at the time, kind of flippant in many ways in terms of statements that he made. And being a news junkie, I kind of had an understanding of how he was being perceived. So the only issues I had when I was working with Carl was we'd be like, Carl, you gotta, be mindful of how they're gonna spin what you say. Carl is very vocal and he's very articulate, and he'd get long-winded sometimes with some of the answers that he would give, and I have to say, look, they're gonna cut that up.
I can remember
cut that up and take it out of context. So. Make your point.
I got to be honest with you. I can remember when you did come in, and I was watching the transition go, and you actually took the city in a very good direction in terms of public relations and everything. So today, okay, you're writing for the American newspaper. You're on the air periodically. Do your bosses have trouble with your candidness?
No. Dr. Suggs, and I'll say this, be very frank about it, and I think I'm being fair to the Monitor. The Monitor couldn't allow me to continue to write for them, because they were, I think, in my personal opinion, beholden to the power structure in Belleville. We're in Belleville right now. As a matter of fact, hope they're not waiting for me when I leave. But and that's not a negative thing. It's just, it is what it is. So they couldn't allow me to continue to write about people that they were beholden to. So Dr. Suggs, who is the owner of the St. Louis American, welcomed me, and he told me, as long as you don't exaggerate, as long as you don't distort reality, you can write for me. And I like the fact that you're so vocal and that you're in your face with what you do. And he's just been nothing but accommodating. In fact, I will say this, a lot of the politicians that I continued to write about attempted to approach Dr. Suggs to try to shut me down, and he basically told them, look, that East St. Louis stuff doesn't work over here. We're about telling the truth over here, and I have nothing but respect and admiration for Dr. Suggs for allowing me to do what I do. I
have another question too regarding growing up in East St. Louis and your candidness and just your positions. How did your family help in instilling those qualities?
Well, by my parents and my grandparents not being political. They always told me that you have to kind of hang your hat on what you say. Your integrity is more important than being political and just being for sale and for the highest bidder. And my mother was particularly very vocal. My grandfather was very vocal, my mother's father, and I learned a lot in terms of integrity and just working hard, my work ethic from my father, and just not compromising your values. So to that extent, I think I learned quite a bit from them, and I owe that to them. And my parents didn't have a lot, but they had a lot of integrity.
You're gonna stay right here, right? Because you would tell me if you had to leave. I don't have to worry about that. Stay tuned for more Smiles. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Smiles Television Talk Show, and we're bridging the gap with Smiles this week. We're talking with James Ingram, columnist for the award-winning St. Louis American newspaper. We talked about a lot of things about your background, your history, but just recently, we've had a commemoration for the race riots that occurred 100 years ago, 1917. What impact did that have then? Does it have now? And what impact does it have on the St. Louis side, if any? Okay, first, threefold question.
I'm just going to just change one of the words. I tend to refer to it as a race massacre.
Oh,
because we didn't do much to riot. It was more or less self-defense in terms of what happened to us 100 years ago, and the impact is such that it was international in scope. You had the likes of Marcus Garvey, Ida B. Wells, W.B. Du Bois, who wrote extensively about the race massacre in East St. Louis. I participated in a book signing recently. We did a book, Making of an All-America City, in which we dealt in part with that riot. So we dealt with that. In terms of the the relationship to the city of St. Louis. As we're taping this, the National Urban League is having its national conference in St. Louis,
Right.
and part of which was the opening of an empowerment center in Ferguson, Missouri, on the very grounds that were torched during the riots there. The St. Louis Metropolitan Urban League came into fruition as a result of the 1917 race massacre. We had our feel-good moment now. We've celebrated, we had the commemoration, the committee did a good job in rolling that out, but what now?
You know what, and when we talk about, and you use the word, and I know you don't mean it quite like that, celebrate it. You know, it's like, how do you celebrate?
It's a commemoration.
Commemoration,
and
right.
that is a more appropriate term. I participated in a documentary called Bloody Island that Thomas Gibson, who's a East St. Louis native, who's now with BET out in Hollywood, produced years ago.
Okay.
Never got any traction. It is a travesty that in 12 years of public school education in East St. Louis, that travesty was never discussed. Can you imagine out in Ladue in a school system where you have a lot of Jewish children that the Holocaust not be taught?
Wow.
Can you imagine that? It wouldn't happen. They wouldn't let it happen. And we shouldn't let it happen in East St. Louis.
You know, James, one of the reasons that I really am glad that you're here and will be coming back periodically, and don't forget James Ingram and James Clark will be bridging the gap from the east side and the west side. But looking at our community, when I was coming up, we had 100,000 people, and it went down to 80. I think now we're down to like 22,000 or something. How can do we need assistance from the St. Louis side? Or how can we help one another?
We have a major problem in this country, and as East St. Louis is a microcosm of that reality as it pertains to black people. We have first-class jails and second-class school systems and third-class dysfunctional family situations. So you've got a toxic mixture here that's created the problem that you see not only in East St. Louis but around the country. We don't have a monopoly on it. So until we rectify the problems within the family, the school system, and prevent this pipeline that we have that's going to the jails, which is why I deal with this prisoner reentry business that I spoke about earlier, we're going to continue to be in the same mess that we're in. We initially started this problem by having a mass exodus of white folks from East St. Louis and taking the business with them. Now we have a mass exodus and brain drain as it pertains to black people who've left East St. Louis and are in Belleville, in Fairview Heights, in Shiloh, and all of these other surrounding communities because of the lack of opportunity, the lack of safety, the lack of just a decent lifestyle in the city of East St. Louis.
Really hate to cut you off because you have such great information to share with us and a wealth of knowledge, but we're going to have to get out of here now because I'm getting signals from Cesarine White from IDEX Photography.
Save something to talk about next time. I understand.
You know what, but James, thank you for coming to Smiles.
Thank you for having me.
This is just the first time because James will be coming back periodically and he's going to help us bridge many gaps. Before I go, I do want to give a shout out to Miss Keisha, I'm just going to call you Keisha. Keisha is responsible for doing my hair and makeup. Thank you, Keisha, and we love you. Be sure to stay tuned and watch the credits because we have a few new sponsors, some individuals, so don't turn off and tune into Smiles every Monday. You can catch us on YouTube and Facebook. Keep smiling. You look better when you smile. And remember, only what you do for Christ will last. The Jackie Joyner Kersee Foundation invites you to the first annual open house and trivia night at 6 o'clock p.m. Saturday, August 26th at the JJK Center, 101 Jackie Joyner Kersee Circle in East St. Louis, Illinois. The JJK Foundation's open house and trivia night will give you an opportunity to view the magnificent JJK Center, participate in trivia night, win cash prizes, and participate in a silent auction. Teams of 8, you only need to pay $200 to participate. On Saturday, August 26th at 6 o'clock p.m., come to the open house and trivia night at the JJK Center. Sponsorship opportunities available. Contact Barb at 314-922-3071. Please contact Barb for additional information at 314-922-3071.